Senate Bill number 229 by Senator Claitor. It is an act to amend Title 33, relative government within East Baton Rouge Parish. Senator Martini sends up technical amendments on behalf of the Legislative Bureau and moves adoption of the technical amendment.
Object so. Senator Claitor.
Thank you, Mr. President. What this bill does is just as important as to what it doesn't do. This bill does not create the city of St. George. This bill only comes into effect, if you look at page 2, lines 4 and 5, in the event of the incorporation of the city of St. George. That technical amendment that's being passed out emphasizes that it only happens, that a technical amendment's on page 7, line 16. The provision of this section shall be null, void, and without effect. I think the technical amendment just says void, but we're essentially saying 3 times null won't be there, void won't be there, and without effect unless the district comes into existence. This is a transition district to provide for the smooth transition of the city of St. George if it comes into effect, and that's what it does. I see a question.
Senator White, you have a question?
Claitor, you got amendments up here.
Yeah. I would ask that the amendment be passed out.
They're out.
Okay.
I got to get them up for consideration.
Senator Claitor, as you just mentioned, this is a transition district. It doesn't create anything. This just is a mechanism to transition from an unincorporated area to a city or municipality should there be a prevailing vote for if that area followed state law under the Larson Act and got their petitions and it was certified and the governor set an election date. Is that the only time that would happen?
Yes, sir. That's the only time it would happen, and it's happened before in Louisiana. It's just following the same procedures that we've seen in the past.
And has this transaction district concept ever been used before?
To my understanding, it has, and that's to make sure that there's a smooth transition. In my recollection, though I wasn't in the legislature at the time, that's what was used for the city of Central.
Correct, and that was because there's no mechanism to help. You're almost in a state of emergency when you vote to incorporate, but you don't have a transition, and it's to help the parish and the new city sit down and negotiate and work things out as how you'll proceed and who is responsible for what, and that's what it does.
Yes, sir, that's what it does, and that you have some assets, you have some services, and you work out who's responsible for what through that process.
Thank you.
You have an amendment, Mr. Secretary?
Amendment sent up by Senator White is set number 1951 by Senator White.
Senator White on the amendment?
Yeah, so just the first two are just...
You can do it front. You don't have to do side saddle.
Excuse me? I don't have to? He's going to christen me. Okay. Just the first two is to set the date. Then it would occur. The no taxes at that time. The other ones are... This area is in the area of predominantly in Senator Claitor and my area, and we kind of share it. But just the first one, line number 3, is that no debt should be occurred. They want to take their debt. They have it budgeted for their debt, but they don't want to take other debt that's not theirs. So that's what these amendments basically do. They're willing to take their debt and their percentage of debt and pay their percentage when the parish pays theirs on like the unaccrued liability. But they don't want to be responsible for unaccrued liabilities for people that never provided services to their unincorporated area. And then the last one, amendment number 4, shall become effective upon final judgment. If there's lawsuits or anything else, it would occur then.
All right, question on the amendment, Senator Barrow, your question?
Senator White, I had the opportunity to kind of sit through the hearing last week, and so it's my understanding that it's estimated that the debt that could be accrued could be somewhere between $100 million. Am I correct?
Well, that was a number that was given out by the opposition at the table, but there were no factual given that that's what it is. Why that's what this transition does. If you see that amendment number 3, it would say that shall not apply to debt secured by parish taxes that relates to the immovable property not located within the municipality. So, I mean, do you think it would be fair for them to take up debt for the Baton Rouge City Police if they've never answered a call there, or for the Baton Rouge Fire Department? They have their sheriff's office that they pay for. They pay for their own fire service, St. George. And then as you go on, they will, whatever percentage is accrued to them for their debt over the time, then they'll pay that percentage and when the parish pays their percentage, they'll pay theirs. And it's just a transition. And they're not running from the debt, and they've done some estimates, and they want to pay their debts. They want to pay their liabilities. But this is a process to set it up and just do a smooth transition, as smooth as possible.
So certainly, in this process, if it does prevail, no one wants to actually take on the debt that they have not incurred. So Baton Rouge would not want to take on that debt, and we're assuming that St. George would not. But some of the examples that they gave are not what you're listing here. So do you remember those examples that she gave in terms of what some of those debts would be?
I don't remember. There was a lot of things said in that meeting. I was present as you were. Remind me.
So one of them I distinctly remember is the one that she talked about with animal control as being one of those expenditures. So things that they legitimately are responsible for, you guys will continue to take on that particular debt.
Yes, and in fact, the new city that I live in, Central, we pay our part of animal control. Whatever it is, the city pays it. And animal control, if I call them, they come to my house in Central and pick up a stray dog or an animal, but we pay for that service. We don't get it free. We didn't ask for it free. St. George, same way. If it passes, they have committed to paying their part of the debt and services, the consolidated sewer district. All those things will continue, but they'll pay their fees with it, library taxes, all that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Senator Peterson, you had a question? No? On the amendment? You have a question on the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator White, the amendment is a significant change from what we heard in the committee hearing. So let's start with the first one, incurred before May 15th, 2019. Why are we choosing that date as the time for the taxes and the debt?
Well, because one of the attorneys had suggested we use today's date, they knew the bill would probably come today, and if it's occurred before then it's part of it, and after then it's fine.
So the debt incurred before today, after today, would not be included?
Well, some of it, all that's to be negotiated. I'm not real sure why they changed that. If you want to change that date, I'm not objected to it or to the passage of the district, but that was one of the dates that was suggested by the attorneys.
Yeah, well, I don't know what attorney suggested it, but maybe they weren't in the hearing, because what was articulated in the hearing, did you know, I think you will recall, was that there's no, you all agreed to take on the debt. Both you and Senator Claitor said if this happens, that St. George's community wouldn't have a problem taking on the debt. Why are we limiting it now? And maybe Senator Claitor, I don't know, you could answer that.
Because they're willing to take on their debt.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the date right now. I didn't even get to that yet. I'm talking about the date. Why does the debt stop right now? Why wouldn't it be the date that this transaction, this occurs?
Put the election date in there.
You could put the election date. October.
Okay, next point. The language in amendment number 3, the language is changing what we agreed to again in the committee. This is opposite of what we agreed to in the committee. You're trying to limit the debt. If you pull out of East Baton Rouge Parish, you're not going to take, you're trying to limit what portion. Now, nobody had a problem when there was investment made by the entire parish.
And the south end of the parish paid their pro rata share of investment. They paid their taxes just like everyone else. There's columns in this parish, unincorporated, Baton Rouge, Baker, Zachary, Central. There's columns of where taxes are collected and where they're spent. And that area of the parish paid their taxes and they received services, okay?
No, but this language is trying to further limit the debt that the municipality, if created, would take on, and that is inherently not fair. But I don't have any further questions. I would like the floor on the amendment.
All right,
Any other questions?
Question on the amendment, Senator Martini?
Thank you, Mr. President. I served on the local municipal committee when this issue came up, and my understanding was that there was some question as to whether or not the town of or the city of St. George, whatever you call it, is going with the amendment that was proposed was that St. George would assume its percentage or whatever of the unfunded liabilities. Is that still what you're intending to do?
That's my exact intent, is they will take their percent, but they're, of the fund balances, they're not even asking for fund balances or their percentage of fund. St. George, but none of that's in here. And we did the same thing in Central. That's why they didn't give us any of the debt, because we didn't take any of the balances, we didn't take any property. All we done was took our 2 cents that was levied, and we had to levy it on ourselves, that is levied in that area for services, and that's what they're asking for. We gave them the half penny for the road taxes, and the new one that's coming up. We gave all that. We're not asking for any of that in any of this legislation. And we're just trying to get an opportunity to sit down and transcend if it passes from unincorporated to a city, because there's no mechanism for this in the Larson Act, and you have to have a mechanism.
And I understand you have to have a transition agreement. My question is, as I appreciated what Senator Claitor said when the amendment came up, he said it was always his intention that the liabilities that would be attributable, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the liabilities that would be attributable to the St. George residents would be assumed by the new city if everything was approved. And I just want to make sure, and that's why I voted to pass the bill out of committee. I just want to make sure that's still your position.
It's still my position. I've always said that they should take their liabilities, but they can't take the liabilities for the whole parish or for the whole city of Baton Rouge that are not services rendered there.
But you're gonna, but you would, that would be part of the negotiation. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it could be, but theoretically, they would pay for liabilities that were used in their area. Why would they take liabilities for a service that only occurred in the city of Baton Rouge or the city in Central? Why would they pay liabilities and unaccrued liabilities for city court in Baton Rouge, where if they have an ordinance, it's not going there. They go to district court.
Right, but as I appreciate it, it's going to, after this, you're expecting some degree of negotiation, and my question is, if it is determined in the negotiation that any particular liability should be the responsibility of St. George, you intend to take that, assume that?
I do intend it, and they intend, but the way the amendment went on, it wasn't very specific. This is more specific, and then they'll sit down, as was done before. The petitioner had 2 representatives, the mayor president, which was Mayor Polden, put his financial officer on there. And they sit down, and it took a while, and they worked it out. And that's the way this is going to happen.
Senator Claitor, you have an objection to the amendment?
I have a question on that.
I'm going to ask him, go ahead.
Senator White, can we pass over this amendment for a moment to correct the language in Amendments 1 and 2 to read date of incorporation?
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to pass the amendment for a moment.
He withdraws the amendment at this time?
Yes.
To
All right.
correct the date to election.
That's my fault.
Got to go work on it.
That's all they're changing, so can I talk on the
Do you have any other amendments, Mr. Secretary?
I have no further amendments right now. We need to return the bill until we get the amendment.
Y'all working on some amendments, Senator Claitor?
Why don't y'all return it so
Guess
that
I'm
I
talking
can
to myself,
share and
huh?
look at this amendment and see if what y'all trying to do is agreeable? Because if this goes through and it's not agreeable, y'all gonna catch hell when y'all trying to get y'all stuff together.
We'll return it to the calendar for a moment.
Very good. Return to council.
Senator Claitor calls back Senate Bill number 229 by Senator Claitor is an act to amend Title 33 relative to government within East Baton Rouge Parish.
All right, Senator Claitor.
I believe there's a set of amendments 204.
Yes, sir. We have a set of amendments by Senator White. It's set number 204. Set 204.
2004. Two O's. Senator White.
Just change the date to date of incorporation instead of today's date on, that's Amendment 1 and 2. And then in, on line 25, change not to shall. Just take out not, that's all it's done. There was a drafting error. That's all it does.
All right. Senator Claitor, do you have any objection to this amendment? Is there any other discussion on the amendment? Senator Barrow, you want to ask a question? Come on now. Senator Barrow, you want to ask him a question? Come on. Come on.
Yeah, I just got the amendment. So early on, and I was trying to get the information that was read in committee so that I can actually reiterate what was actually read as it related to the audit report. An audit report that was done by an independent body that actually stated what the costs would be as a result of this pullout, which is $100 million. And I want to read it verbatim, so you may want to dispute that, but I'm gonna get it so I can make sure that all the members know.
Say that again?
Say what again? The audit report that was read said that it's $100 million fiscal note.
And I'm not denying it may not be $100 million, but there was no specific, it wasn't specific to what. And we're just saying that they don't want to take on debt that wasn't used there, services there, and that when the parish pays their percentage on debt, that the pro rata share, whatever that is, the pro rata share that's attributed to the new city, they pay the same percentage that they're supposed to pay. They pay at the same time as the parish. And that the unfunded liabilities, everything's the same. I'm not disputing that it's going to be that much money. You don't see anywhere, but all this does is just try to clarify that they're going to pay their debts that's attributed to them, not that they're denying debt. I've never said they're going to deny debt, and it may be somewhere around $100 million. But that's an audit that was done by the parish, and I don't know that it was certified by anybody else. I'm not running from the debt, and neither is the St. George petitioners. They want to pay their debt, but they want to make sure it's the specific debt to them.
So it appears that there was an agreement that was made during the committee hearing that now you're trying to change the wording in terms of how it's going to be done.
I'm not changing the agreement. I'm just putting some specificity to the agreement, that they will take their part of the debt. When the parish pays their part of the debt, the unaccrued liability, if their percentage is 10%, 20%, 30%, they'll make their payment. And they'll pay it at the same time that they'll give it to the parish to pay it. And the last paragraph says down here, it says that it can only be used for that. If it's for unaccrued liabilities, you can't use it for something else. Pay down the unaccrued liabilities. It's pretty simple.
So when I first came up, when we first brought the bill up in the amendment, you denied that it would be $100 million, and now you're saying that you don't know what it's going to be, that it could be $100 million or more.
Do you know it's going to be exactly $100 million? That's why I'm saying that's this transition. You sit down and work that out, and if you don't, you go to court. That's all. I see no more questions, Mr. President.
Oh, yeah. Senator Colon, you had a question? Well, all right, it's time for the floor. You want the floor on the amendment?
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. So, members, I'm not standing in objection to the amendment at this point, but I do want to clarify a couple of things. And Senator Martini came down earlier and told you about what happened in committee. And so we're a little bit perplexed with this at this point because in the committee we agreed to something, and then we got this amendment and we weren't aware of this amendment and didn't have time to even talk to our city government about it. So, and I was on the phone with somebody from the city at that point when you called me up, Mr. President. But I think that Senator White was talking about unfunded liabilities and the firemen, the unfunded liabilities for the firemen. Is that correct?
Any employee.
Or any employee. So as it relates to the firemen, because St. George, where their boundaries are, our fire people may be closer to some parts of St. George than the St. George Fire Department, so they still will be servicing that area because it goes to the person that's absolutely the closest. The $100 million is legacy cost, and we started the public safety complex on Airline Highway, and everybody agreed to the alcohol, beverage, and control being there. The DA is there. The clerk of court's there. The sheriff's moving there. That's a legacy cost that the whole parish agreed to. And so what I'm saying, what I'm saying is that we agreed that you can't take a city out without the city taking the debt with them. And they should take the debt with them, and they agreed to that. So where we are right now is this amendment that's a little scary to Senator Barrow and me and others that are interested in this from Baton Rouge. And what we would like to see is that they would hold off on this and then come back with the bill maybe as tomorrow, so that we can have time to digest this amendment and see exactly what it does. Because I had the city on, and in a short period of time, they haven't been able to distinguish what's happening with the amendment. So I'll ask my colleagues to do that, and if not, then I'm going to stand in objection to the amendment.
Senator Claitor?
Okay. The amendment that was put on in committee, if you look at the bill on page 7, lines 22 through 25, that's the amendment. The district in the proposed municipality created shall be liable for its proportionate share of the parish's outstanding debt secured by the parish taxes and its proportionate share of all unfunded liabilities of the parish, including pension plans and other post-employment plans. You don't see in the amendment deletion of that lines. We're not trying to change what's going on there, but we're putting some parameters on it that simply says is if it's the city of St. George's tomato, they're going to pay for their tomato. If it's the city of Baton Rouge, they have to assume theirs, and there's going to be a lot of things that have to be worked out along the way. But as Senator Barrow just said a minute ago on the bill that she was taking, time grows near and short, where if we roll over to tomorrow, that's Bagneris. I'm sure one of my friends will put the objection button, and then we'll be on Monday, and then things will be short. I will pledge to Senator Colon that I will work with her. The bill has my name on it, and if there's issues, we'll be back here talking to you guys about concurrence. But this is not an issue as it relates to whether the district's going to come in to pass or not. It's either going to be voted on and occur. Doesn't have anything to do with the transition district. It only comes into being if the people vote for it. So I'm going to ask that you vote in favor of the amendment. Is this absolutely perfect in the form that it is in now? Probably not. And I'll keep working with Senator Colon on it, and Senator Barrow, and the city of Baton Rouge.
Senator Peterson, you wish to speak on the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. President. I stand before you in opposition to the amendment. It represents utter and complete bad faith. Utter and complete bad faith. First of all, we all agreed to these amendments, and that's what happened in the committee. We agreed to them because neither Senator White nor Senator Claitor disagreed that the timing would be different. That is why they had to return the amendment and change the date. Did not speak to anyone. I'm not even from Baton Rouge. But I just communicated with the mayor of Baton Rouge, who is in New York, and I asked her, have you seen the amendment? She says, no, I have my lawyers looking at it. I'm trying to navigate right now. Karen, I don't have time. Blatantly unfair, trying to blindside. Number two, so the date was changed quickly. Let me tell you about the language and amendment, line 11 through line 13. The paragraph shall not apply to unfunded liabilities associated with the employees and retirees who did not provide services to the area of the parish included in the municipality. What does that mean? What that means is unfunded liabilities associated with employees and retirees. Right now, the employees and retirees who didn't provide services to the area of the parish, that would be the future St. George if it happens, then they will not have to pay for that. Now, if you have let's use for example 1,000 employees in the parish, who's going to say that the director of sanitation, the director of capital projects, who's going to say which one of those people provided services? How are you going to bifurcate and silo certain people? Number three, bond ratings. We talked about this in the committee. The bond ratings of the parish will take a nosedive. A nosedive. That is why we put the language in. So they are further trying to narrow without talking to the city. Don't think this can only happen in Baton Rouge. Don't think this can only happen in Baton Rouge. It's not fair. So look, the bill came out, but it came out with amendments that protected the parish, and they agreed to them. And now they haven't even spoken to the mayor, who just happens to be a former member of this body. Hadn't even talked to her about the amendments, notwithstanding the people that serve the area, Senator Barrow and Senator Colon. Bad faith.
Senator Barrow, you wish to speak again?
Members, I rise in opposition to this amendment. Just a few minutes ago, I had a bill, and I pledged to this body, I pledged to Senator Peacock, that I would not move the bill if I found that it had a substantial fiscal note. You guys actually decided that that bill would not move. When we were in committee and I sat there and I listened, this agreement was made. This was an amendment that was put on that bill that we said, okay, then if they decide, if the voters decide that they want to break away from Baton Rouge, that they would take all of their debt. And they put this amendment on and they agreed. Now suddenly, today, they just come with this new amendment, didn't give us an opportunity out of just mere respect to let us see it, that if indeed this is all that it does, then they would have given us a heads up on it. So I ask that you do not vote in favor of this amendment.
Senator White, you have a right to close on your amendment.
Thank you, members. Our form of government is pretty unique. It's not like Orleans. It's not a city that encompasses the whole parish. Currently, we have 4 cities in a big and unincorporated area. This is an effort by an unincorporated area to become a municipality. You do it by law. I worked with Representative Smith in Baton Rouge to narrow the scope of the Larson Act 2 years ago, to tighten it up, to do the things they wanted to do. These folks followed those guidelines, went and got over 15,000 petition signatures. Go try to do that. They were certified. The governor set the election for October. They'll vote on it then. Should it come to pass, you have almost 80,000 people that have no mechanism to stand their city up. What this does is let the city have that opportunity. And all this amendment does, I did not, in bad faith, take out that amendment from the committee meeting. It was numbers thrown out. I don't disagree, it could be $100 million, but that's to be determined. All this amendment does is set the parameters. They want to take their debt. They budgeted for their debt, but they only want to take their debt, and they're willing to do that. And that's all this amendment does. It did not take that amendment out of the bill. This is just parameters. Thank you. And I ask for you, this is a local issue. I ask you to vote for it.
All right, Senator White has sent up an amendment to which there is objection. When the machines are open, those in favor will vote yes, those opposed no. Secretary, vote. Open the machines, please. Vote your machines. Senator Claitor, yes. Vote your machines. You through voting? All right, close them up, please. 23 yeas, 11 nays. The amendment. Do you have further amendments, Mr. Secretary? All right. On the bill, Senator Colom, you wish to speak on the bill?
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, let me just say, we weren't debating just now whether St. George can succeed from Baton Rouge or from East Baton Rouge Parish. We were only talking about the bill that allows them to get the funding in place. There has to be a memorandum of understanding between St. George, if it's to come to be, and the city of Baton Rouge. And when things like this happen, and the Senate has voted, and we know, you've said what you want to do. You wanted to keep that amendment on, but that wasn't what we agreed to in committee. And when Senator Peterson talked about good faith, we asked the author and Senator White to just give us the time for them to look at it and see if we could come in agreement. Ultimately, they're going to have to go right back to the mayor, president, and work out something with her. But this isn't how you do it when you're fighting about something that you're saying you're narrowing, but we don't know what it really does. So we weren't talking about the city and the city leaving. We were talking about this bill setting up a temporary government so they can have funding. That's what that was. I don't like the idea of the St. George issue, and everybody knows that. Everybody knows where I stand on that. But the city shouldn't have to take any of the responsibility of that St. George. Just like St. George does not want to pay any of the city of Baton Rouge or the parish's debts, the parish doesn't want to have to pay their debts. The parish hasn't been really good to St. George. Let me tell you how good they've been. I had a little area over there, right over there, 5 minutes from here where I live, and the city didn't send any money over there. The money went to South Baton Rouge, down to St. George. So once you get St. George beautiful, the streets are good, there are no potholes, they got everything going on, we take all of the money down there, then all of a sudden you want to be a city, while North Baton Rouge doesn't have a doggone thing. So yeah, I'm PO'd about it. I don't like it. But it's the way it is. Things happen and we have to accept them. But my district has done without. And I believe when you get a divorce, one person can get everything. When I got a divorce, I had to split. I had to split what I had. I didn't walk away with everything. Neither did my ex. And that's all I'm asking for people to do around here. Let Baton Rouge get what they supposed to have, and let St. George pay for what they supposed to have. That's as simple as you can put it. When you get a divorce, some of the stuff goes one way and some goes the other way. I want East Baton Rouge Parish to be made whole. I want them to have their share when St. George starts their city. I wish them well. When it passes, or if it passes, I hope they're successful, because I don't want anything bad to happen in any part of Louisiana. I love Louisiana. I love the St. George community. I love the people out there too. But all I'm saying is that North Baton Rouge is devastated, and much of the stuff and the money in the parish went to South Baton Rouge, where Southeast is and where St. George is going to be. And I think it's only fair that they be responsible for what they're taking out of this parish.
All right, Senator Peterson, you wish to speak on the bill?
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in opposition to the bill, certainly as it's been amended, but I opposed it before the amendment, with amendment, no amendment. I think this is inherently wrong and it's inefficient. There's a lot of talk about fiscal conservatism around this body. This is actually in opposition to fiscal conservatism, because you're creating within your parish another entity. And this can go for any parish in this state. We're duplicating efforts. But we want to come to this mic and try to streamline and reform and save. But in this instance, it's okay. I'm going to say something that many people will not like, but it's the truth. There are some racial implications in this instrument. It is a hard fact. This is not my perspective. This is not an opinion. This is real, and it's happening right here in Baton Rouge. Some serious racial implications to what is happening with this instrument. We have a strong African American woman leader who served in this body, who just passed a major bond initiative for infrastructure to improve disproportionately the area that wants to pull out of this parish. Notwithstanding her leadership, the effort continues to undermine her leadership, to pull away. I asked the question in committee, listened to the whole debate, engaged. What is it that you would like done differently? I went through the whole list of services that is provided by the parish that the city will now provide. Well, we'd like, I said, what about animal services? Well, you're not happy with the animal services? Well, no, we're just going to do it ourselves. Well, what about infrastructure? I mean, everybody in the state is concerned about infrastructure, no matter where you live. Well, she just passed a bond initiative. And look at the area that is called St. George's. They're prospering because of the rest of the parish. Don't be fooled. Don't be fooled. Hypocrisy is a terrible thing. Christianity is powerful. We represent different people, but they're all human beings. They all want the same thing. They want a good education. They want health care. They want to provide for their families and sustain their communities. They want a good, clean environment. But when we contribute, all of us contribute. Why should a select few be able to pull out after all the tax dollars have been contributed to your area to the detriment of a poor black neighborhood in this parish? I'll be damned. It's wrong. And wrong is wrong. I didn't get sent here to sit at my desk and watch injustices and unfairness happen. It'll be a goddamn shame if this bill passes.
All right. Senator Barrow, you wish the floor again?
While the bill seeks to provide infrastructure if the voters of St. George so choose to pull away, I decided that I would get my sign to bring up, because I just want to make sure that as Senator Carter actually pulled out some very important points, I just want to remind everybody that this can't happen anywhere in the state of Louisiana. But one Baton Rouge is what I seek. We are better together. There will be unintended consequences by far if this measure passes. Even though we have a fiscal note here, the new amendment that was added on does not say what the unintended consequences would be. And I'm just going to ask you guys, just out of fairness to me, since when I had my bill and I asked that if you would just grant me just the opportunity to pass it, and that if it had a fiscal note that I wouldn't move it, I'm going to ask you to extend the same courtesy to me to this bill. There are unintended consequences, and we don't even know all of them. We don't have an updated fiscal note in terms of what that amendment does to this bill. And I'm going to ask you, if you just would, out of fairness, it's been in the last 20 minutes, and y'all, all 9 people voted yes and everybody else voted no. I'm going to ask you to extend the same courtesy and let us work out the details of this bill. This is a very serious issue that's going to have unintended consequences, and there are going to be a lot of people that suffer as a result of this action if it's not done properly. And I would just ask you to grant that favor.
Senator Martini, you wish the floor?
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, we sat through that committee, and I believe Senator Donahue will agree. We kept sitting here saying, why are we involved in this? Because nobody wants to be involved in it. But the one thing that really came out in this, and Senator Colomb had a bill before that, which we deferred, which would have allowed for everybody in Baton Rouge to vote on this, as opposed to just the St. George people. Had that bill passed, it would have been the only parish the reason I voted against it, it would have been the only parish in the state where the whole parish got to vote, as opposed to the way the current law is now as it pertains to every other parish. But the one thing that was pretty much given is it doesn't matter what we do anyway. No matter what we did on Senator Colomb's, Senator Colomb's bill, she had the mayor had her attorney there. Her attorney said she has the lawsuit drawn up, and when we deferred Senator Colomb's bill, she said that they would probably sue and claim that the current law is unconstitutional. I then asked Senator Claitor. I said, "What's going to happen if we pass the bill?" He said the city of St. George, or the town of St. George, is going to challenge it. So no matter what we do, it's going to end up in court. The $100 million figure, unless I never saw a fiscal note. As a matter of fact, Senator Peterson and I were involved in a somewhat heated exchange, and she says, "Well, who's going to pay it? What if it's $100 million?" And I did say, "Well, I'm not paying it," but that's, and that became the big, I don't want to say joke, but that never was the real figure. And then Senator Peterson said, "Well, don't you think they should take part of they should assume the responsibility for their liabilities, their percentage?" I said, "Sure, I'll vote for that." And we voted for that, and we put that on the bill. Now, I don't know how that amendment actually read. I don't think it means much more than what this amendment says. Because the main thing is, it's going to end up in the attorney's hands and it's going to end up in court. I don't care how you vote on it, but there was never any, I just want the record to reflect that the only reason, I'll speak for myself, the only reason I voted for it was because they agreed to accept their share of the liabilities. I'm advised by Senator White and by Senator Claitor that is still their intentions. No matter what their intentions are, I promise you, unless I'm reading this wrong, it doesn't matter how we vote because it's going to end up in court. So do whatever you think is right. But that's what happened in committee, and that's why the bill came out as it did. Thank you.
All right, Senator Claitor, you have a right to close.
Thank you, Mr. President. One of the things that came up in this discussions that we've had relates to the amendment, and it says it's been accepted onto it, but I just want to get it straight. This paragraph shall not apply to unfunded liabilities associated with employees and retirees who do not provide services to the area of the parish included in the municipality. Everybody has a right down here, but one of the reasons that people tend to stay out of other people's local business is sometimes they don't understand how it operates there. If you're in the unincorporated part of East Baton Rouge Parish and you have a police emergency, the sheriff is going to show up. The East Baton Rouge Parish policeman's not going out there. That's not his jurisdiction. He can't arrest you. He doesn't have any authority. If your house catches fire, it's the St. George Fire Department that's going to show up. I am sure that the City of Baton Rouge Police Fire Department would show up and help out if called upon, but that's not their jurisdiction of where they are. And Yvonne's shaking her head, so I guess it's possible that I'm missing that, but I haven't seen that occur where I've been. As far as the racial overtones, I can't agree with that. Yvonne and Regina and I, we have discussions, and I don't think either one of us has ever seen race as an issue, but amongst ourselves. But what happens out there in the public, I would agree that sometimes people do have racist attitudes out there, but I don't see it here. But perhaps I'm just a colorblind person and don't recognize it. My family, my friends, I grew up in East Baton Rouge Parish. My family home is in East Baton Rouge Parish. My family business is in East Baton Rouge Parish. I have friends, the district I represent includes East Baton Rouge Parish and includes these people out in St. George. And they have worked and they have worked and they have worked and they have worked for their opportunity to have a vote. And I understand when you don't approve of something and don't agree, that I certainly understand the rules, and you can protest it and you can vote against it, and you can use parliamentary procedures to try to slow it down, and you can use litigation, but these people have been determined to exercise their right to incorporate. Whether they win or not, we don't know, but that horse is out of the barn. This horse is just simply the transition if it happens. If you want anarchy and you don't want any kind of transition, vote it down. Let's create more anarchy and uncertainty and create more problems. But I think it's a very reasonable thing to do to have a transition district if the vote passes by those people, and I would ask you to vote for it, please.
Senator Claitor has moved final passage of the bill. When the machines are open, those in favor will vote yes. Those opposed, no. Secretary, vote. Open machines, please. Vote your machines, please. Vote your machines. Are you through voting? You through voting? All right, close them up, please. 24 yeas, 11 nays. Bill is finally passed. We consider vote. Objects on.